Some discoveries change your life forever, and mine came sewn inside a baby blanket, destined for the garbage. I was just a lonely grandfather trying to visit my 10-year-old granddaughter when I witnessed something that made my blood run cold. My daughter-in-law, Penelope, destroying the blanket I'd lovingly made with my own hands. The rage in her eyes told me this wasn't about spring cleaning. When I found what she was really trying to throw away hidden in that soft fabric, it launched me into the most terrifying investigation of my life. Nothing could have prepared me for the web of murder and lies I was about to unravel. Before I continue this shocking story, please tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because what I'm about to reveal will make you question everything you think you know about the people closest to you. I had been driving through the quiet streets of Burlington's Lakeside District that October afternoon, heading to visit my 10-year-old granddaughter, Aurelia. At 69 years old, these visits had become precious to me. Too precious. Ever since my son Gideon died 7 years ago in that terrible accident, my daughter-in-law, Penelope, had grown distant cold. She always had excuses why I couldn't see Aurelia. Work schedules, school activities, the child being sick. The excuses never stopped coming. From my car across the street, I watched Penelope emerge from the garage, dragging several black garbage bags behind her. Her movements were sharp, angry. She wore her usual perfect appearance, hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, scrubs from her job at the University of Vermont Medical Center, but her face carried an expression I had never seen before. Pure disgust. That's when I saw it, the corner of that familiar mint green fabric peeking out from one of the bags. My heart lurched. She was throwing away Aurelia's blanket, the same blanket I had knitted with these weathered hands during those endless sleepless nights after my Martha passed away. The same blanket my son Gideon used to wrap around little Aurelia every bedtime, watching her tiny face light up with comfort and joy. But there was something different about the way Penelope handled it. Something violent. Something filled with a hatred that made my chest tighten with unease. Penelope shoved the blanket deeper into the dumpster with unnecessary force, as if she wanted to destroy it completely. As if that innocent piece of fabric had somehow offended her. She slammed the dumpster lid shut with a bang that echoed through the quiet neighborhood, then stormed back into the house without looking back. I sat frozen in my car trying to make sense of what I had just witnessed. Why would she throw away something so meaningful? Something that connected Aurelia to her father's memory, something that connected her to me. The rational part of my mind told me to drive away, to call later and arrange a proper visit, but my heart wouldn't let me leave that blanket behind, not when it represented everything I had left of my relationship with my granddaughter. I waited until I was certain Penelope wouldn't come back outside. The street remained empty, peaceful in the way small Vermont neighborhoods always were on weekday afternoons. Fallen maple leaves scattered across the sidewalk, painting everything in shades of gold and crimson. It should have been beautiful. Instead, it felt ominous. Stepping out of my car, I walked quickly across the street. My hands shook as I lifted the dumpster lid. The smell of garbage mixed with that familiar scent of Penelope's expensive perfume. I dug through the bags until I found it crumpled and dirty but still intact. I pulled the blanket free and held it against my chest. It still carried traces of Aurelia's scent, still held memories of countless nights when my son Gideon would call me laughing about how this magical blanket was the only thing that could calm his daughter when she cried. Driving home with the blanket beside me on the passenger seat, I couldn't shake the image of Penelope's face. The hatred in her eyes hadn't been directed at the blanket itself. It had been directed at what the blanket represented, at me, at my son Gideon's memory, at everything that connected Aurelia to her father's side of the family. Back in my small house on Elm Street, I carried the blanket straight to my bedroom. I needed to clean it, to restore it to the condition it deserved. I spread it carefully across my bed, smoothing out the wrinkles with gentle hands. That's when I felt it. My fingers touched something that shouldn't be there. Something hard, rectangular, deliberately hidden between the cotton layers. My heart started racing as I realized someone had sewn something inside my granddaughter's blanket. I retrieved my sewing scissors from Martha's old craft box, the same ones I had used to create this blanket years ago. Along the bottom edge, I found stitching that didn't match my own work. Someone had carefully opened the blanket, hidden something inside, then sewn it back together with meticulous precision. Thread by thread, I worked to open the hidden compartment. When I finally reached inside, my fingers closed around something cold and metallic. I pulled out an old cell phone, probably 4 or 5 years old based on the model. Why would someone hide a phone in Aurelia's blanket? I found an old charger in my desk drawer and plugged the device into the wall. When the screen flickered to life, it prompted me for a passcode. My heart sank. How could I possibly guess what password someone would use for such a secret device? Then I had a thought. Most people use familiar numbers for their passwords. I tried the most obvious choice, Penelope's own birthday, which I remembered from family celebrations. 0615. The phone unlocked. Even for her most secret device, Penelope had chosen the most predictable password. The realization made my stomach turn. The photo gallery made me feel sick. Penelope smiling in an expensive restaurant with a man I didn't recognize. His arm wrapped around her shoulders, kissing her cheek. The timestamp showed 8 years ago, 2 years before my son Gideon died, 2 years while she was married to him. More images followed. Penelope and this same man on a beach, in a hotel room, in a car, all while she was supposedly the devoted wife and mother. My son Gideon had never known. He had trusted her completely. The messaging app revealed conversations between Penelope and a contact saved simply as D. The early messages were romantic, filled with declarations of love. Penelope wrote about missing him, about hating to pretend with my son Gideon. As I read deeper, the messages grew darker, more desperate. I want to be with you, Penelope had written. I want a real life together, but he'll never agree to a divorce. He's too traditional. Then came the message that made my blood run cold. There has to be another way. I need him to disappear. The man's response was cautious, but Penelope persisted. Message after message growing more desperate. I don't want to wait any more. If he weren't here, we'd be free. A few days later, I talked to someone who can help us. Just trust me. The messages ended abruptly 1 week before my son Gideon's death. In the notes section, I found a single entry written 2 days before that terrible September afternoon. Tuesday, 3 p.m. He'll be alone at home. Everything must look natural, an accident. That Tuesday afternoon, September 15th, 2016. The day I got the call from Penelope screaming and crying, telling me my son Gideon had fallen down the stairs. The day I raced to the hospital, only to learn he was already gone. I remembered that day so clearly now, how Penelope had been wearing a pearl gray dress with bloodstains on the sleeves when I arrived at the hospital. How she had sobbed against my shoulder, telling me everything would be all right. How the doctor had explained that my son Gideon died from severe head trauma. But now I remembered other details I had dismissed at the time. How calm Penelope had seemed beneath her tears. How quickly she had composed herself. How she had insisted we didn't need an autopsy because the cause of death was obvious. The date on that final message made my blood run cold. It was sent the morning my son Gideon died. This wasn't an accident. This was murder. The weight of what I had discovered pressed down on me like a physical force. My son had been murdered, and I needed help to prove it. At 6 a.m, I called the only person I could trust completely. Atticus. What's wrong? Octavia Monroe's voice was immediately alert despite the early hour. Tavi had been my neighbor for over 20 years. My closest friend since Martha's death. Tavi, I need you to come over, right now. It's about Gideon. 15 minutes later, she knocked on my door. A small woman of 65 with silver hair and sharp eyes. Tavi took one look at my face and stepped inside. You look terrible, Atticus. What's happened? I led her to the kitchen and told her everything. About finding the blanket, the hidden phone, the photos and messages proving Penelope had been planning my son's murder. Tavi listened without interruption, her expression growing more serious with each revelation. When I finished, she reached across the table and took my hand. Show me, she said simply. I retrieved the phone and watched as Tavi examined the evidence. She studied each photo read through the messages with methodical attention. When she reached the final note about making everything look like an accident, she set the phone down with tears in her eyes. My God, Atticus, she really did it, didn't she? I know how crazy this must sound. It doesn't sound crazy, Tavi said firmly. It sounds like the truth. Now we need to figure out who this D person is. We moved to my computer and navigated to Penelope's Facebook account. Her profile was public, filled with carefully curated images of a perfect single mother. As we scrolled through her friends list, Tavi suddenly grabbed my arm. There, she said, pointing at the screen. Look at that profile picture. I clicked on the account for Dante Rivers. The profile photo showed the same man from the hidden phone's pictures. Dark hair, strong jawline, confident smile. According to his information, he was 35 years old and worked as a construction supervisor. That's him, I whispered. That's Dee. Tavi leaned back, processing our discovery. So now we know who helped her kill Gideon. But Atticus, we can't just walk into a police station with a phone you found in a dumpster. They'll ask how you obtained this evidence. She was right. The messages were damning, but easily dismissed as fabricated evidence from a grieving father. We need more, Tavi continued. Something concrete, financial records, bank transfers, something that proves money changed hands. I thought about Penelope's comfortable lifestyle, her expensive clothes, the new car she had bought last year. Where had that money come from? The life insurance, I said suddenly. Gideon had a substantial policy through the hospital. $500,000. Tavi's eyes widened. And Penelope was the beneficiary. We need to find out what happened to that money. If she paid Dante for helping her, there would be a paper trail. But how do we get access to her financial records? I stared at Dante Rivers' smiling face on the computer screen. The man who had helped murder my son. We're going to have to get creative, I said. We need to find a way into Penelope's house, into her personal documents. Now we knew who Dee was, but we needed more than messages and photos. We needed proof of money documents, something concrete that would make the police believe us. The plan was simple but dangerous. I would visit Penelope under the pretense of bringing Aurelia a gift, while Tavi would find a way to search for financial documents. We both knew the risks, but we needed concrete evidence. 2 days later, I stood on Penelope's doorstep holding a small wrapped present for my granddaughter. My hands were steady, but my heart raced as I rang the doorbell. Penelope opened the door, wearing her usual perfect appearance, but her smile seemed forced. Atticus, this is unexpected. I brought something for Aurelia, I said, holding up the gift. I hope it's not a bad time. She hesitated, clearly wanting to refuse, but social convention won out. Of course. Come in, but I can only spare a few minutes. We have plans this afternoon. The house looked exactly as it had when my son Gideon was alive, but now it felt cold and unwelcoming. Aurelia appeared from the living room, her face lighting up when she saw me. Grandpa, Atticus. She ran into my arms, and for a moment the weight of what I was doing nearly overwhelmed me. This innocent child had no idea she was living with her father's killer. I missed you, sweetheart, I said, hugging her tight. I brought you something special. As Aurelia unwrapped her gift, a small jewelry box with a dancing ballerina, I watched Penelope from the corner of my eye. She stood by the window, checking her phone repeatedly, clearly impatient for me to leave. 20 minutes later, Tavi knocked on the door. Oh, I'm so sorry to bother you, she said when Penelope answered. I'm Tavi Monroe, Atticus's neighbor. I gave him a ride over, and I think I left my reading glasses in his car. Could I possibly use your restroom while he looks for them? Penelope's expression tightened, but she couldn't refuse such a reasonable request. Of course. Down the hall, first door on the left. While I pretended to search through my jacket pockets and continued playing with Aurelia, Tavi disappeared down the hallway. My pulse quickened as the minutes ticked by. What if Penelope decided to check on her? What if Tavi couldn't find anything? Your friend is taking quite a while, Penelope observed, glancing toward the hallway. You know how it is at our age, I said with a forced chuckle. Everything takes longer than it used to. Tavi finally returned, looking slightly flustered, but carrying her glasses. Found them in my purse the whole time, she said with an embarrassed smile. Getting old is terrible. We said our goodbyes quickly, with Penelope practically pushing us toward the door. Once we were safely in my car and driving away, Tavi pulled out her phone and showed me the photos she had taken. Atticus, you're not going to believe what I found. The first image showed insurance documents. Gideon's life insurance policy through the hospital, clearly stating the $500,000 payout to Penelope as beneficiary. The claim had been processed just 3 months after his death. The second photo showed bank statements. A transfer of $200,000 to an account belonging to Dante Rivers, dated exactly 1 week after Penelope received the insurance money. The third photo made my blood run cold. It was a small safe hidden behind clothes in Penelope's closet. Inside were neat stacks of cash and a handwritten note. Dee's payment, $200K, remaining $300K secured. She kept records, Tavi whispered. She actually documented paying him. And she still has $300,000 in cash hidden in her house? I said, my voice shaking with anger and disbelief. As we drove through the quiet streets of Lakeside District, I couldn't shake the image of Penelope watching us from her window as we left. Her expression had been suspicious, calculating. Tavi, do you think she suspected anything? I don't know, she replied honestly. But we got what we needed. The insurance money, the payment to Dante, everything. Now we had the complete picture. The insurance money, the payoff to Dante, everything. But as we drove away, I kept thinking about Penelope watching us through the window. Did she suspect something? With the evidence Tavi and I had gathered, there was no choice but to involve the authorities. The next morning I called the Burlington Police Department and requested an urgent meeting with a detective. This concerns a possible murder case from 7 years ago, I told the dispatcher. I have new evidence that needs immediate attention. 2 hours later, Tavi and I sat across from Detective Orion Vale in a small conference room at the police station. Vale was a man in his mid-40s with graying temples and the steady gaze of someone who had seen too much. He listened as I explained who I was and why I was there. Mr. Fairmont, I understand this involves your son's death in 2016. That case was closed as an accidental death. What new information do you believe you have? I took a deep breath and began from the beginning. I told him about finding the blanket, about discovering the hidden phone, about everything we had uncovered. Vale took notes, his expression remaining neutral and professional. May I see this phone? He asked. I handed over the device and watched as Vale examined it carefully. He scrolled through the photos of Penelope and Dante. Rivers read the incriminating messages and studied the note about making everything look like an accident. These messages appear to show premeditation, Vale said slowly, but I need to verify their authenticity. How did you determine the identity of this D person? Tavi leaned forward. We compared the photos to Penelope's social media contacts. The man in these pictures is definitely Dante Rivers. Vale made more notes. And you mentioned financial evidence. I showed him the photos Tavi had taken at Penelope's house. The insurance documents showing the $500,000 payout. The bank statements revealing the $200,000 transfer to Dante Rivers, just 1 week after Penelope received the insurance money. Vale studied each image carefully, then turned to his computer. I'm going to verify this bank transfer through our financial crimes unit, he said, typing rapidly. If this transaction is legitimate, it establishes a clear connection between your daughter-in-law and Mr. Rivers. 20 minutes later, Vale looked up from his screen. The transfer is confirmed. $200,000 from Penelope Cross's account to an account belonging to Dante Rivers, dated exactly as you stated. My heart pounded as I realized the detective was beginning to believe us. I'm also going to run a background check on this Dante Rivers, Vale continued. See what kind of man we're dealing with. Another 15 minutes passed before Vale spoke again. Mr. Rivers has a record. Assault charges from 10 years ago, though the case was dropped. More recently, some financial troubles. Significant debt that appears to have been resolved around the same time he received that payment from your daughter-in-law. The pieces were falling into place, and Detective Vale could see it too. Mr. Fairmont, based on what you've shown me today, I'm going to reopen your son's case. I'll need to bring Mr. Rivers in for questioning, and I want to have your son's body exhumed for a second autopsy. Relief flooded through me. Finally, someone in authority was taking this seriously. There's one more thing, Vale said, his tone becoming more serious. I'm going to put Penelope Cross under surveillance, but I need you to promise me something. You cannot approach her or let her know that we're investigating. If she's as dangerous as this evidence suggests, we can't risk her running or destroying additional evidence. What about my granddaughter? I asked, suddenly terrified for Aurelia's safety. We'll move carefully but quickly, Vale assured me. The child's safety is our priority too. As we prepared to leave, Detective Vale closed the file folder and looked at me with the gravity that comes from years of police work. Detective Vale closed the file and looked at me seriously. Mr. Fairmont, we're going to get to the bottom of this, but I need you to stay away from Penelope. If she's as dangerous as you think, we can't risk tipping her off. Detective Vale wasted no time. Within 24 hours, Dante Rivers was sitting in an interrogation room, his confident construction supervisor demeanor cracking under the pressure of police questioning. I waited in an adjacent room watching through one-way glass as Vale methodically dismantled Dante's lies. Mr. Rivers, we have evidence placing you in contact with Penelope Cross around the time of her husband's death. Vale began sliding the printed messages across the table. Care to explain these communications? Dante barely glanced at the papers. I don't know what you're talking about. I barely knew the woman. Really? Vale pulled out the photos from the hidden phone, because these images suggest otherwise. Dante's face went pale as he saw himself embracing Penelope in various intimate settings. His hands began to shake. Okay, fine, we had a relationship. That doesn't prove anything. What about this? Vale placed the bank transfer records on the table. $200,000 from Penelope Cross to your account, just 1 week after she received her husband's life insurance payout. That's quite a coincidence. The color drained completely from Dante's face. He stared at the documents for a long moment, then put his head in his hands. I need a lawyer, he whispered. You can call one, Vale said calmly. But Mr. Rivers, we have you on financial records. We have the messages planning a murder, and we're about to exhume Gideon Fairmont's body for a second autopsy. If you cooperate now, it might go easier for you. 20 minutes of silence passed before Dante finally broke. She made me do it, he said, his voice barely audible. Penelope, she planned everything. I was just supposed to help. Help with what exactly? The accident. Making it look like Gideon fell down the stairs. Dante's voice grew stronger as the confession poured out. She said he would never agree to a divorce, that he was too traditional. She wanted to be free to be with me, but she needed the insurance money first. Vale leaned forward. Tell me exactly what happened that Tuesday afternoon. I waited until Gideon came home from the hospital. Penelope had given me a key. When he walked upstairs, I grabbed him from behind, held his arms so he couldn't fight back. Then I pushed him down the stairs. The room fell silent except for the hum of the recording equipment. But that's not all, is it? Vale pressed. We've been looking into Penelope's background. Mr. Rivers. There are other suspicious deaths. Dante looked up sharply. What do you mean? Let's start with the child. Aurelia isn't really Penelope's daughter, is she? Dante's face crumpled. No. Aurelia's real mother was Ophelia Rivers. Penelope met her at the hospital when Ophelia was pregnant and alone. Penelope befriended her, offered to help. After the baby was born, she killed Ophelia and took the child. My heart stopped. My granddaughter wasn't even Gideon's biological daughter. And the father? Vale asked. Alaric West. He worked at the hospital, too. When he started asking questions about Ophelia's disappearance, Penelope had me stage a car accident. Made it look like he lost control on a mountain road. Vale pulled out another file. What about these elderly patients at the hospital? Mrs. Eleanor Hartwell, Mr. Frederick Mason, Mrs. Dorothy. All died of sudden cardiac arrest while under Penelope's care. Dante nodded miserably. She was poisoning them. Small doses of medication that would cause heart failure. She convinced them to change their wills, first leave money to the hospital. Then she diverted the donations to accounts she controlled. The scope of Penelope's crimes was staggering. She wasn't just a murderer. She was a serial killer who had been operating for years. How many people has she killed? Vale asked quietly. At least 6 that I know of, Dante whispered. Maybe more. While we had been uncovering evidence, a search team had been executing a warrant at Penelope's house. Vale's radio crackled to life with an urgent transmission. Detective Vale, we found a hidden safe in the suspect's bedroom. Contains detailed records of all her crimes, including video recordings she made as, trophies. But before Vale could respond, another transmission cut through the static. Detective Vale's radio crackled urgently. Sir, we have a problem. Penelope Cross just withdrew the remaining $300,000 from her account. She and the child are gone. The words hit me like a physical blow. Aurelia was in the hands of a serial killer, and Penelope had enough money to disappear forever. We need to move now, Detective Vale barked into his radio. All units to Burlington International Airport. Suspect is likely attempting to flee by air. I'm coming with you, I said, already reaching for my coat. Mr. Fairmont, this is police business. That's my granddaughter. The desperation in my voice must have convinced him because Vale nodded grimly. Stay behind us and do exactly what I say. The drive to the airport felt endless, even with sirens blaring and Vale weaving through traffic at dangerous speeds. My mind raced with terrible possibilities. What if we were too late? What if Penelope had already boarded a plane? What if she hurt Aurelia when she realized she was trapped? Vale's radio crackled with updates from his team. Suspect purchased tickets under the name Vivian Cross. Flight to Miami departing in 40 minutes. We're coordinating with airport security now. As we screeched into the airport parking lot, I could see police cars converging from multiple directions. Officers in tactical gear were already positioning themselves at various entrances. Their Vale pointed toward the departure terminal. Security cameras spotted her at the check-in counter 10 minutes ago. We rushed through the automatic doors into the busy terminal. Travelers moved in all directions, completely unaware of the drama unfolding around them. Vale spoke rapidly into his radio, coordinating with the officers already inside. "Target located at Gate B7, came the response. "She has the child with her and 2 large suitcases." My heart pounded as we made our way through the terminal. Gate B7 was at the far end of the concourse, and I could see uniformed officers taking positions along the way, trying to look casual, while blocking potential escape routes. Then I saw them. Penelope stood near the boarding gate, looking nothing like the composed woman I had known for years. Her hair was disheveled, her clothes wrinkled. She clutched Aurelia's hand tightly while scanning the terminal with wild, paranoid eyes. Aurelia looked terrified and confused. Even from a distance, I could see she had been crying. "I don't want to go," I heard my granddaughter say as we approached. "I want to see Grandpa Atticus." "We have to leave now." Penelope snapped, her voice harsh and unfamiliar. "Stop being difficult." That's when Aurelia saw me. Her face lit up despite her tears, and she tried to pull away from Penelope. "Grandpa..." Penelope's head whipped around, and our eyes met across the crowded terminal. In that instant, she knew it was over. Her face contorted with rage and desperation. "You..." she hissed, pulling Aurelia closer. "You ruined everything!" Detective Vale stepped forward, his badge visible, other officers closing in from all sides. "Penelope Cross, you're under arrest for multiple counts of murder. Release the child and put your hands where we can see them." "No," Penelope screamed, backing toward the boarding gate. "You don't understand. She's mine. I saved her." Aurelia began crying harder, frightened by Penelope's increasingly erratic behavior. Several travelers stopped to stare, sensing the tension in the air. "Let her go, Penelope," I said, stepping closer despite Vale's warning gesture. "She's just a child. She doesn't deserve this." "Deserve this?" Penelope laughed bitterly. "Do you know what I did for her? What I sacrificed? I gave her a better life than that pathetic mother ever could have." Penelope's grip on Aurelia loosened for just a moment, and that was all my granddaughter needed. She broke free and ran straight into my arms. "Grandpa Atticus," she sobbed against my chest. I was so scared. "It's okay, sweetheart," I whispered, holding her tight. "You're safe now." Officers immediately surrounded Penelope, who made no attempt to resist. Her suitcases were opened, revealing neat stacks of cash and falsified identification documents. As they placed handcuffs on her wrists, Penelope turned to me with eyes full of hatred. "You think you've saved her?" she screamed as they led her away. "You have no idea what that child really is. You'll regret this." 6 months later, I sat in the Burlington County Courthouse, watching justice finally unfold. The trial of Penelope Cross had drawn media attention, but for me, it was simply the end of a nightmare that began with a discarded blanket. The prosecution presented their case methodically. The hidden phone with its incriminating messages. The bank records showing the payment to Dante Rivers. The forensic evidence from my son Gideon's exhumed body confirming he had been murdered. Detective Vale testified about the $300,000 in cash and the detailed records Penelope had kept of her crimes. Dante Rivers, now serving 25 years, described how they had planned my son's murder and how Penelope had killed 5 other people. The evidence was overwhelming. Ophelia Rivers, Aurelia's biological mother, murdered. Alaric West, the father, killed in a staged car accident. 3 elderly hospital patients systematically poisoned. Throughout the trial, Penelope showed no remorse. She blamed everyone but herself. Dante had manipulated her. The victims deserved their fate. Society had failed her. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. "Guilty on all counts," the foreman announced. Judge Patricia Morrison sentenced Penelope to 6 consecutive life terms without parole. She would die in prison. As they led her away, Penelope looked at me one final time. The hatred in her eyes had been replaced by defeat. Her perfect plan undone by an old man's love for his granddaughter. The custody proceedings were straightforward. With Penelope in prison and both biological parents deceased, I was Aurelia's only family. Tavi served as a character witness, promising to help support our little family. Aurelia struggled at first. Nightmares were common, and she asked difficult questions. With help from a child psychologist, we worked through her trauma together. I enrolled her at Lakeside Elementary, where she quickly made friends and began to flourish. Slowly, she began calling me Grandpa Atticus, instead of the formal Grandpa she had used before. The change was subtle, but it meant everything. It meant she was healing. It meant she felt safe. Tavi became integral to our lives. Aurelia started calling her Grandma Tavi, and we formed an unconventional but loving family. Sunday dinner's homework helped celebrating every milestone in her young life. On quiet evenings, I would take out that mint green blanket, now clean and soft again. I would remember how finding it in that dumpster had started this entire journey. How something so simple had uncovered such terrible crimes and ultimately saved an innocent child. Aurelia would curl up next to me and I would tell her stories about my son Gideon, how he would have loved her with all his heart, how proud he would have been of the strong, intelligent girl she was becoming. The trial was over. Penelope would never hurt anyone again. But more importantly, Aurelia was safe loved and beginning to heal from the trauma that had defined her early years. Sometimes the most precious things come wrapped in the darkest mysteries, but love always finds a way to bring light. Today, as I watch 10-year-old Aurelia playing in our backyard, that mint green blanket folded safely in her bedroom, I'm reminded that God works in mysterious ways. What began as heartbreak became the key to uncovering truth and saving an innocent life. Among all the grandpa stories I could share, this one stands out because it teaches us that evil can hide behind the most trusted faces. These betrayal stories are difficult to tell, but they're necessary. Penelope wasn't a stranger, she was family. She was someone we loved, trusted, and welcomed into our lives. This experience taught me lessons I want every family to remember. First, always trust your instincts. When something feels wrong, it usually is. God gave us intuition to protect the people we love. That October afternoon, when I saw Penelope's hatred toward that blanket, every fiber of my being knew something was terribly wrong. Second, never give up on family. There were countless moments when I could have walked away when the evidence seemed overwhelming. But love doesn't surrender. Love fights until truth prevails. Third, justice may be delayed, but it will come. My son Gideon waited 7 years for his story to be told. But God's timing is perfect, even when we can't see it. The hardest part about betrayal stories like this is accepting that people we trust can harbor such darkness. But among all Grandpa's stories of triumph over evil, this one proves that ordinary love can overcome extraordinary deception. Aurelia calls me Grandpa Atticus now with genuine affection. She's thriving in school, surrounded by friends who love her. Tavi remains our family cornerstone, and together we've created something beautiful from something terrible. This journey reminded me that even in our darkest moments, God has a plan. Even when evil seems to triumph, love finds a way to shine through. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope. Subscribe for more Grandpa stories about real families who refuse to give up. These betrayal stories show how love and determination can expose even the most carefully hidden crimes. Tell me in the comments, have you ever fought for someone you loved? What would you do if you discovered something that changed everything about your family? Remember, the most powerful weapon against darkness isn't violence or vengeance, it's the unwavering love of family and the courage to seek truth, no matter how painful. Sometimes God uses the smallest things, like a discarded blanket, to reveal the biggest truths. Never underestimate the power of paying attention, caring enough to act, and loving someone so deeply that you'll move heaven and earth to protect them.